Hello, welcome to Uncommon Leadership. I'm Michael Hunter with Uncommon Teams, and today I'm talking with Nalani Ginzer. Nalani is an executive coach focusing on transforming our relationship with work. She has spent the last decade focused on building workplaces that refuel us rather than drain us. She's done this through work in strategy consulting, experience design, people ops, talent development, and most recently, building an internal coaching team at a fully remote and global software as a service startup called Chili Piper. Her current work focuses on working with leaders to transform their relationship with work for themselves and for their teams. Her belief is that leaders hold particular power, influence, and responsibility to create the conditions for themselves and others to live this reality. Nalani is currently in the middle of 6 months of travel and remote work with her husband. Today, she's talking to us from Greece. Welcome, Nalani.
Hey, Michael. Thanks for that intro and happy to be in dialogue with you.
I'm excited to have you here today.
Me too.
In your journey to seeing people as people and learning to leverage their unique gifts to best accomplish your goals, when did you first recognize this might be a valuable approach?
Yeah. My first instinct is to say that maybe the turning point for me or the light bulb moment for me was a little bit different from others. I won't qualify it, I guess. That moment or that time for me was early in my career when I was working in consulting. And I was working at a boutique consulting firm. It was a small number of us, but we were working with really large uh, international clients. So think companies like Samsung, Verizon, kind of these behemoths. Uh, and we were working at a strategy level, often with C-suite folks. And my realization of including people and seeing people as people came. I remember this specific project where we were helping some executives make really strategic decisions around future direction, but the recommendations weren't grounded in real human experience. They were grounded in executives' thoughts about other people's experiences. And sure, those are informed by those people's lived experiences and what they've learned from teams they've led in the past. But I had this moment that I sometimes reference as like a light bulb that once you see it, you can't unsee it, where I realized there were these huge strategic decisions being made with implications for employees, for customers, for users, but none of those people had a voice. And it like didn't make any sense to me. And so part of it turned into for me thinking about the strategic process, the product development process as, why aren't the downstream users or just folks or stakeholders really being more involved and being consulted for their lived human experience in the development of things that are going to impact them. Uh, that was this moment for me of like, I just doesn't make sense. Like, why aren't we and others doing this more? And that launched me into kind of the next stage of my career of working in experience design, which that whole industry is about focusing on customers, focusing on users. What is their lived experience? What makes their experience unique? How can they contribute to what we're trying to build? And so I'm sure we can get into how that then connects to my work as a coach and around building workplaces where employees are the stakeholders. You have to talk to them about what is it that they want. Same as being a manager. When you're leading a team, if you just lead based on what you think is right versus really listening to the people who you serve, people on your team, um, it's a totally different model. And it just really started from some consulting work.
In that case, were you able to bring the stakeholders' experience into the discussion at all?
That specific kind of moment in time, there wasn't really a willingness to go there. So I often talk about the difference between wanting something and being willing to do something. And in my experience in consulting, it was often that executives wanted to say involve more stakeholders, but their willingness to say take the extra time wasn't quite there. So you can really want something to and like say that, yeah, okay, that sounds great. But if you're not willing to face what maybe are the trade-offs or the implications, investing that time often doesn't happen. And so that was my experience often in consulting, where there are trade-offs for time and speed, and also giving up a little bit of ego and the vulnerability to say, I might not have all the answers here, both as a consultant or the lead on a project, but also the customer and executive who's been in their industry for so long. You say, yeah, I'm going to go talk to, a junior frontline manager about what they know about our industry with this new product line that we're thinking of. It takes a lot of humility to do that. And for that specific project where I had this realization, we weren't able to get there, but so much of my work since then has been how can we have the most right people at the table to really hear them.
And have you found an answer to that question?
Mm, the how question of how we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Let me think for a moment. It it's always a matter of priorities, especially in the startup world, which is where I've spent, the last 5 or so years at least. The trade-off for speed is real. And so to me, it's really a titration that sometimes you're going to get wrong. Maybe you're going to over-index a little bit, and you spend a little bit too much time on something where you're heard the same thing from a bunch of people, and like, oh, okay, looking back, I could have talked to 10 people, not 30, or 2 people instead of 7. And this is true for leaders making decisions, right? Even just run of the mill, week to week decisions. How many people do I get involved to hear inputs? Um, so I guess maybe that's a long way of saying there's no silver bullet and I haven't figured it out. But in my coaching work, I'm constantly working with leaders and finding their own titration to to increase maybe the way that they are able to listen to their instinct about how much can I trust what I already know versus how much do I need to really make sure the right voices are heard for their unique human experience. And I, as an outsider to someone I'm coaching, won't have an answer for them. I don't know what's right or wrong in their specific context. And to me, that's the beauty of getting other perspectives. It's really actually coaching is doing the same thing in a lot of ways. When someone says, "Hey, this challenge in my life or this challenge at work, like I'm not quite sure, where this is taking me or how I feel about it," they're getting another set of eyes and ears. I don't think I'd thought about it in those terms until you asked me that, but it's a really beautiful connection, I think.
Yes. And that is so important to connect with our inner guidance and understand what that's telling us, even when, and maybe especially when that's going against what common wisdom or all our other advisors,
Mhm.
other factors are telling us should happen, we should do.
Yeah, to me, that's the the pillar of leadership, which is how can you stay true to your instincts, but also support your decision making and your leadership with the right complements. It's not all about you as a leader. Your instincts are often about when to delegate, when to empower someone else, when is it right for us to step away. Um, and sometimes our instinct is saying, "I need to go ask someone else. I don't know." That's okay too.
Yes. Have you found a process that tends to work with most leaders to help them get more in tune with that intuition?
Hmm. So the first thing that comes to mind is that the work around tuning into your intuition typically doesn't manifest when you're in the day-to-day hustle and bustle of work and life. And so there's a pause or a slowing down and a listening that's really important, where the noise that's around you, whether metaphorical or actual noise, um, kind of needs to soften in order to tune in. And I don't mean this in a woo-woo way of like connecting with, or a religious way of like connecting with anything higher or out there. But the intuition of our thoughts is something that we're often pretty attuned to, right? We most of us know, oh, I had this thought, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. But there's other intuition centers within us that aren't usually taught in the typical leadership development programs, of what are my emotions communicating right now. If I'm really scared, that's information. And I love the work of Dr. Susan David. She has a book called Emotional Agility. It talks about this idea of emotions as signposts. So it doesn't mean that they are telling us exactly what needs to be done, and we don't need to follow that. But listening to the direction and the signposting, that information that they're delivering is really critical to this, what I'll call this process of tuning into our intuition, because emotions, like, they are information. They're not just here for no purpose. They might not like the purpose that they're trying to fulfill or what they're trying to protect us from. Those parts of us, especially that experience fear, are often just bringing a good intention of wanting to protect us from some future pain. Um, that's really hard to tune into what that message is if we're just caught up in the hustle and bustle of going from meeting to meeting, and the busyness, or kind of, I often think of it as this like, it's like buzzy vibration, and I get caught up in it with the best of them. I took some deep breaths before you and I hopped on today because I was in a busy coffee shop and I was feeling that energy of that, the busyness of people working on their laptops and chatting and networking and all of that. Um, so bringing the awareness to pausing and being like, oh, okay, that meeting that I'm about to step into, I'm feeling a little bit nervous. What might that be trying to tell me? There's intuition inherently in that. And then there's another layer of intuition that would be like, what's our body telling us? Like, is my stomach in knots right now? Is my chest really constricted? Or maybe it's the opposite. Wow, I'm feeling so light and so like energized when I have this thought about, that team meeting that's coming up. So when I think about intuition, it's really like those different sources: our head, our heart, and our body.
How much have you found leaders are able to do this sort of internally in the moment or after the fact? And how successful are they at bringing this into the team dynamics so that everyone starts talking about, well, my mind is telling me this, but my body is telling me this, and my emotions are telling me something else. I'm really confused.
Totally, totally. Um, so the way that I'll answer that is by saying this is a muscle to build. And just like if we go to the gym and we want to get stronger because we have a big move coming up and we want to be able to lift our boxes, we're not typically going to build that muscle by that one time moving process. We're going to train, we're going to practice. And this muscle is most easily worked on in times where things are a little bit less critical. So that moment of, I'm in a meeting, my whole team is looking at me, let me, pause to tune into what I'm feeling. That's a pretty advanced level of this work. To be able to identify that in the moment, like, that's not where we start. We start with looking retroactively of that thing that happened 2 weeks ago or yesterday. And in my coaching work, that's often what we're practicing when someone arrives at a coaching session. They bring something that's been happening, or there's a question or a challenge, and we practice just that in an assisted way, where we all can look back at a situation and be like, oh, I feel this way or I feel that way, but really pausing to say, okay, and what's below that? what that might that be trying to tell me, and if I had a similar experience in the past, what did I learn from that I might apply here? That quieting of the noise around us is easiest to do in those calmer times. And so I kind of use the analogy of like building the muscle in times of peace, but it's available in times of war. Forgive the kind of violent reference, but it's the intentional practice, even in the moments where you don't need it, that then can allow down the line us as leaders to have that available at that critical moment. And that this is a long journey. There's no band-aids to this work unless you have maybe a little birdie in your meeting, like constantly watching you and being like, Michael, hold on, let's pause. Who can help role model what they're seeing? And so, whether it's in my work with organizations or even in a coaching session, I can often play that role where I'll see someone going down a path and pause and be like, "Hey, can we take a step back? I notice I need to take a deep breath here. I'm wondering if that would be supportive to you. What are you noticing about how that energy just shifted for you? Or what are you noticing about when that person asked that question? What changed? Like, let's do that in real time." And so for leaders to role model that for their teams, really, really hard to do if they haven't built that muscle for themselves first.
Right. If I, as a leader, would like to start experimenting with this in real
Mhm.
time,
Mm.
do you have suggestions for how I could approach this?
My first suggestion is if there's a willingness to explore this, is to start by not doing it in real time, but is to do it as a practice or at a time where you're not kind of in the spotlight. So, that could be after a presentation, after a meeting, at the end of each week. But looking back when you can have a moment to reflect, to practice, oh, okay, I realized I was feeling this. Hmm. Oh, if I had realized that in the moment, maybe I would have approached this differently. No, what do about now? So if there's a true commitment to exploring this, doing it um with space to have repetitions, not in the moment, is my preferred way to step into this work. Um, if someone's like, no, I just like really want real time to like in meetings be able to pause for myself and for others. One way to do that would be to ask for someone to hold you accountable to it or to do it kind of on your behalf. If there's someone that a leader maybe trusts enough. Um, and I'll talk in a moment about what that could look like. But the caveat is that takes a lot of vulnerability. I keep using this example of team meetings, but I think it's a good one. Because if a leader anoints an accountability buddy for this kind of like pause and check in with self, with the group, make sure that others are having the space to tune in with themselves when they're contributing, to have someone call you out and saying, hey, let's pause for a moment. I'm noticing maybe we're going a little bit off track, or I'm noticing that the energy in the room like is getting a little bit heated. Really easy as a leader to get defensive if someone says that. And so, unless you're really confident that you can receive an interruption like that with grace and vulnerability, my recommendation wouldn't be to jump to that as the first step, because you risk, uh, we could talk more about team dynamics, but you risk displaying behavior and role modeling behavior that you probably don't want to be reinforcing with your team. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Both let's practice in a safe space, and then when we're ready, this is just naturally going to start happening in a less safe space or a
Mm-hmm.
more uh, high outcome. The right word is escaping me. An environment where the risk is bigger,
Mm-hmm.
and also that if I push ahead and do it before I'm ready, I'm likely to have reactions that are not the reactions I mean to have. And so I'm teaching my team opposite of what I'm trying to get to.
I think that's a good summary. And the thing I would add is that reactions are just that. They are instinctual. They are going to come from a place of us not feeling like we have choice in that moment. And so, as a leader, one of the more powerful things we can do is to own our reactions after the fact if we're not able to do it in the moment. And so, if there's a really bold leader out there who's like, I just want to jump in and I want to be showing up with, checking in with myself, checking in with my team in real time without that practice, if they can own that after the fact and go back to their team and say, hey, team, I realized in that meeting I got really defensive. That wasn't my intention, but my reaction got the best of me. Can I get a redo? Here's what I would have liked to say in the moment, or something where you're really role modeling, taking ownership over your impact on others, ownership over your behavior. That situation can actually be even more powerful than the simple getting it right in the moment. And so it's a question for all of us as leaders of where is our own psychological safety with the team we're leading or with our peers? And what are we willing to experiment with in our own development journeys? Because that's what this is. This is our journey as humans, as leaders, as peers, and how much we show of, the trying something and it not going exactly how we wanted. That's part of the learning journey too, especially if we can own that and just continue the learning cycle.
Yes. Come at it with intention, an
Mhm.
awareness of the impact we're likely to have on the other people in that meeting so that we can shape that impact to more likely be what we want it to be.
We will never get it all the way right. Part
For
of being
sure.
human.
Yes. A friend of mine says, as humans, the only thing we're perfect at is being imperfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if I, as a leader, want to experiment with this in meetings, one way I can help set that environment, shape that environment, is to start the meeting saying, so I'm trying something out here. I don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah.
I may have not the reactions I want to have. Uh, we're going to see what happens. And even maybe ideally, are each of you okay with this? Because so that we can offer them the experience rather than inflict it on them.
I would actually go a step further by saying this can be a really wonderful way of building more safety with both the individuals on the team and the collective. And often starting with the individuals can be safer than starting with a statement to the whole team of saying, hey, I'm trying something out. Can you group, you know, if it's hold me accountable or bear with me or whatever the request may be? There's often that anonymity of a group, depending on how large it is, of like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, like we got it. But if that same leader in their one on ones with each person on their team was to say, hey, I really want to share with you something that I'm working on, I would really welcome your feedback. We've hopefully already talked about how I best receive feedback, how you best give feedback, so we have some common understanding. And turning it into a personal relationship building moment where then you get to that meeting and each person has already had a conversation with you where you've invited that honesty of, hey, I want to let you into my journey as a leader and I need you, or I'm requesting rather, that you play a role in helping me be a better leader for you, for our team, for the company. And in my experience, approaching it from both that individual level and then also speaking to the collective is a safer way to make that progress. Yeah.
Yeah, ease into it. Just like to
Mhm.
go back to your working out in preparation for the move
Yeah.
analogy of we could walk into the gym and start lifting our body weight. It's
Mhm.
probably not going to go so well. And we're probably not going to be able to get back to the gym for a while because we're going to hurt things.
Yeah.
Whereas if we go in and we start with a 2 pound weight and then a 5 pound weight and then work up to whatever our goal is, then we can do that in a safe manner and we can sustain that work over time.
Yeah. And then to build on the analogy, it would be sharing with people in our life that we have this goal and we're starting to go to the gym. And it's like, hey, if you see me posting on Instagram before 10 a.m., like, can you call me out because I should be at the gym? Or- That's a silly example, but having, accountability is a funny thing where ultimately the most powerful is our intrinsic accountability to ourselves. There's a really important role to invite other people in to hold up the mirror for us. And that can be both accountability, that can be reflection, that can be generation of insight. There's a lot of ways that we can use the people in our life to support our growth journey. And leadership is, I mean, the best example of something that you can't go at it alone. You're inherently intertwined with so many other people. And so if you try to make, your growth journey an independent one, I'm just not sure how that works. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. When you're working with someone who seems to want to go faster than you're feeling is safe for them, how
Hmm.
do you help them understand what might be going on and reason about what is going to work best for them?
Can you maybe give me a reframe or a different example? Because I'm finding that the faster than is safe for them in this context, maybe I don't quite know how to answer that.
Okay.
Mhm.
So let's go back to this example of I'm a
Yeah.
leader who really want to go in and start doing this with my in the team meetings.
Okay.
And from talking with me that I haven't built up that one-on-one connection with my team,
Hmm.
that some of the reasons I came to you to work initially are that there's contention between me and my team. There's a lot of dysfunction going on, and I don't understand what's going on. I don't have any idea how to fix it.
Okay.
So you're pretty sure that if I just show up in a meeting and say, "Guess
Ah.
what, team? Here's what we're going to do today," that's
Yep.
not going to go well.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks. That helps a lot. Um, yeah, there's a few different parts of me want to answer that in a few different ways. One of them with my solid coach hat on is to say, you are the expert in your life. Who am I to know if you going into that meeting with that is the right or wrong thing? And so with that hat on, it's an exploration of, okay, I'm hearing that you're wanting to do this. Like, let's double click a little bit. What is that need or that feeling underneath that's really driving that speed and that urgency? Maybe there are other strategies to help meet that desire and that need. And we could talk through different scenarios. Again, not for me to say what is right or wrong in your team, in your life, in your world, but at least inviting the perspective of what's driving this desire. And let's make sure that whatever action you're wanting to take is actually fulfilling that root need. Because sometimes we come up with ideas and tactics that we think will solve the fear that we're having or the desire that we have, and they ultimately don't. And so if we can backtrack a little bit, that would be an approach in a situation like that to get more on the table and generate possibilities. And maybe that initial possibility still feels like the right one to that person. And again, who am I to tell them, no, that's a bad idea? Unless I'm in an internal coaching context, like I've been in the past, where I know the players, I know the team dynamics, I know the department. Sometimes though, there would be a time where I'll say, "Can I'm going to take off my coaching hat for a moment. I'm going to share with you, like from a outsider but an insider's view, how I think this might go because I know your team." So that's a little bit of a different context if I have it with that leader. But being really clear on what my role is and if that's welcome to say, here's some possibilities if I were to guess, or if I were to put myself in your team's shoes, here are some possibilities of the reactions I think you might get. So there's a continuum between those options of ways that I work with leaders in either a pure coaching context or kind of a strategic partnership context or something in the middle where it's really about trying to surround the possibilities. And none of us can know exactly how things are going to play out, but that comes back actually all the way beginning to what we were talking about of our own lived experience. We have a lived experience that might have me think I know the right answer. That, oh, if that leader did that, like it's going to go haywire. That leader also has their own lived experience, and I, as a coach, need to trust their intuition that they do know something about their team. Sometimes they might not be in touch with that intuition, and it might be a part of them that's operating from fear or ego or a need for recognition that's taking over and saying I'm gonna do this. And so then it would be working with, again, surfacing everything else that's kind of surrounding that to get everything on the table, to talk about the different paths forward.
One thing we can do in those situations, whether we're that leader who really wants to make this bold move, or we are someone else in that context somehow,
Yep.
is to bring awareness to what the driver is, and to check, is that what I want driving me in this situation?
And the references I've made here to needs, kind of getting under the surface, that comes from the work of Marshall Rosenberg and his work of nonviolent communication. And that's really the essence of NVC, the acronym for nonviolent communication, is how can we operate from a place of needs, of our own needs, of other people's needs. And needs here aren't, the thing that I materialistically desire, or the thing that I need someone else to do for me. Needs are what is core to us as humans, all of us. They're kind of this universal, basic list of things. So we all have a need for safety. We all have a need for security and connection and collaboration and respect. And it's a pretty long list. You can also think of it as things that we value. But in my work the past year and a half or so, NBC has been a huge way of getting to that core before we make a new decision or before we kind of jump to conclusions, whether it's about what we think we want in our own journey, the story we make up about why our team member did that thing. Needs underlie everything that we do. All of our behaviors and all of our choices in life are essentially strategies to meet needs. And if we can get down, especially for ourselves, to what's the need that's driving this, we can have checkpoints of, oh, okay, is that thing I was about to do actually going to meet the need? But again, it's a high level of self-awareness and a muscle to build, to have that checkpoint and say, oh, okay, that decision I was about to make, like, where's that coming from?
So this reinforces the usefulness of taking that pause
Yeah.
on some regular cadence, whatever that means for you, so that you can check in on all these things of, Are my needs driving me, or am I using them to move forward?
Yeah. And one of the things I've learned for myself and definitely through all of the teams and the clients I've worked with is that those check-in mechanisms to slow down are really personal. So if I was to say, hey, Michael, I think you should pause every morning to check in, do some gratitude journaling, like we could come up with a laundry list of all of the things
Mhm.
that, blog posts say we should all be doing. One of them being, checking in on what are my needs today? Oh, I'm really needing connection today. Okay, maybe I'll meet for coffee with a friend. But if I was to give you that list, the likelihood that that sustains in your life is like probably pretty low. And so the personalization of what works for me in my own life and work journey to build these muscles, it's, yeah, it's so personal. And sometimes it takes a lot of trial and error, like New Year's resolutions, one example, trying something, we fall off the wagon, uh, trying a new like weekly goal setting process, or in a corporate setting, quarterly OKRs. Like most organizations try things and then they don't work. Maybe you iterate, maybe they totally fall off, and then 6 months later, another version of the same thing comes around. Same thing in our own life of how we build that like metaphorical gym for our mind and our heart and our leadership. It's yeah, there's no cookie cutters. We can try the cookie cutters, but those are usually what falls off the table.
It's, we need to bring in our lived experience and use that to guide us.
Yeah, exactly. What do we know about ourselves? Maybe you know that you're like mornings don't work for me. I'm not going to do anything before 10 a.m. Don't talk to me. So if I was to be like, hey, Michael, you should like do this practice in the morning, it's like it's a recipe for failure.
This has been a great conversation today, Nalani. What else should I ask you?
Hmm, talked about a lot. Um, I don't know if it's so much a question to ask me, but maybe a summary of what's on my mind as we've in this topic as we get ready to wrap up. Is that the difference between what we talked about before, the difference between wanting something or wanting to improve as a leader or wanting your team dynamic to be different is very different than having a willingness to do the work and remain committed to making that change. And we can all say that we want something that's different. Um, but not having the willingness doesn't need to be a bad thing. It's more about checking in with yourself and being honest. And I think that is, like I've said this term a lot today, it's the biggest part of leadership. Being honest with ourselves about where we're at and what we're willing to um what we're willing to do, what we're willing to invest in for ourselves and our teams. If we pretend that, we're really open to feedback. An example. If we pretend as a leader we're super open to feedback from our team, we tell them all we're really open to feedback, and then we get feedback and we receive it defensively and don't follow up with ownership. That to me is a display of I want to be open to feedback, but I'm not actually willing and committed to, or rather, I'm not yet ready to be willing to be as open as I need to be to receive it. Um, so that feels related to this intuition conversation we've had around leadership of like how can, before we embark on anything new, any change, any decisions, how can we get really real with ourselves, to not waste our time? Because I think a lot of people think that they should be doing something different with their teams, or they think they should be doing psychological safety team exercises, or start their team meetings with this, or run their one-on-ones in this certain way. But if you take at face value those suggestions or frameworks without a true willingness to kind of like be a part of or receive what comes out the other side, the inauthenticity is palpable. And so the more we can be honest with ourselves about what we're willing to engage with as leaders, even if it's no change, we're going to be more authentic in that lack of change, in that status quo. And there's all sorts of downstream benefits that come from that around employee engagement and productivity. Just authenticity is at the core of it all. And it has to start with like looking at ourselves in the mirror of what are we willing to examine in our own journey too.
Yes. And nonviolent communication is a great way to bring that authenticity to ourselves and into our conversations with other people. And you are,
Right.
coincidentally, probably not, have a blog post to share about that topic.
I do. Yeah. NVC has been a really big part of my own personal journey for the past year and a half, going on 2 years. And I actually just got back from a intensive kind of lived residential experience of NVC in Norway with about 80 other folks from around the world. Some were coaches, some are just individuals interested in this, others are folks who work in organizational design and all sorts of other aspects of walks of life. But yeah, I just published a blog post a bit ago about kind of the basics of needs-based communication. And NVC is a framework. There's kind of some easy things that tomorrow we could all use in our communications, whether it's at work or with our partners or friends. But it's also a bigger consciousness of like are we orienting to the relationships in our world, in our life, to make sure that we're getting what we need, but by proxy, it's more likely that our needs are met and that we get what we want if we also have a little bit of care for the other person that we're in relationship with. So yeah, this blog post talks about this needs-based approach at a really basic level. There's a lot of NVC content out in the interwebs. This is my attempt to kind of distill it down from my experience, especially working with leaders through this context.
Nice. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
If people would like to connect with you to learn about NVC, the gap between want and willing, all the other things that we talked about, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So reaching out to me either through my website or LinkedIn are the two best ways to get in touch. I'm sure we can have that linked in the show notes here for anyone, but also just Googling my name or putting my name into LinkedIn. Pretty easy to get in touch with me, either of those avenues.
Sounds great. And those will be in the show notes along with the link to your post.
Perfect.
What would you like to leave our audience with today?
Hmm. I think for me, this topic of getting real with ourselves feels really salient. And maybe the invitation would be after you listen to this later today, tomorrow, to take a moment, could be on a walk or could be in writing, to think about what, like, I'm just thinking about this on the fly here. Like, maybe what might you not be admitting to yourself right now? Like, what is something that you say that you really want, but you're not actually willing to engage with around change, around decision making, even if you're not, in a formal leadership role in your life. Kind of holding up a mirror for yourself and see if you can ask yourself that hard question. Like, what am I not facing, or what am I not being honest with myself about? It's really deep. And so actually, even before engaging with that, there's this question of like, for anyone, do I want to even give myself a look in the mirror, right? Maybe I think it would be a good idea, but I'm not actually willing. Great, pause there. That's part of being honest with yourself today. Yeah.
Any amount of awareness is more useful than
Yes.
any lesser amount.
I love that. That's a great way to say it. Mm,
Thank you.
yeah.
And audience, if you take Nalani up on her invitation, let us know what you find. If you have questions, comments, feedback on anything we've talked about today, we'd love to know. What did you enjoy? What did you resonate with? What do you disagree with? We'd like to hear all of that. Please let us know.
Especially what you disagree with. I'd love to hear. And in my own practice of my development, it's an opportunity for me to check myself in the moment, right? Am I defensive if someone says, "Oh, I disagree with that thing you said"? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but it's my work to keep doing. So I really invite that from others to give me that chance.
Yes, I do as well. Thank you, Nalani. Thank you,
Thanks,
audience.
Nicole. What a joy.
Certainly was. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on Uncommon Leadership today. If you found these stories interesting, inspiring, and illuminating, sign up for my newsletter. Hop over to uncommonteams.com and use the form at the top of every page. You'll be the first to know about every new episode of Uncommon Leadership. You'll also discover how you can build uncommon teams. If you'd like to chat about doing that yourself, email me, michael@uncommonteams.com, or use the contact form on my website. Thanks so much.